What's up, guys? Welcome to another wonderful photography video. And I'm saying that because I don't know if I'm going to put this up on a Tuesday or a Friday yet. So either way, today's video is going to be all about focal length and lens compression and how to get better photos and make sure you're using the right focal length for your portraits. I'm going to use the drift method. Freaking incredible. Round f16 for that to get that sunburst. All right, so to do this, I'm gonna have Brittany come out here and we're gonna take some pictures and I'm gonna show you, we're gonna go through from 24 millimeters all the way to 400 millimeters. And we're gonna show you the difference that focal length can have on your subject and your background. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do to demonstrate this is we're gonna start out at 24 millimeters. I've got Brittany over there. Don't freak out because I am using a flash just because I want to make it look pretty. Might as well get some good shots out of this, right? So the flash has nothing to do with any of this. It's just helping me balance this daylight. So let's go ahead and start with 24 millimeters. So for this first shot, we're going to go in at 24 millimeters and we're going to be looking at what this does to Brittany and what it does to the background. So we're gonna have to get super close because I'm only gonna go for a half shot. All right, so now let's back it up and we'll go to 50 millimeters. So what you'll start noticing is the farther we go back, if we're gonna take a look at this bush behind her, and at 24 millimeters, it looks really far away. So the farther we go back and the higher we increase our focal length, the more that background is gonna come towards us. And of course, it's not really moving, but that's the illusion of lens compression. All right, so that bush is rapidly getting closer to her head. So now we're gonna go back to 100. All right, so now let's switch lenses real quick. All right, so now I got my 1 to 400 on, and we're gonna start getting crazy with the lens with the focal lengths here. So now it's going to 200. So now we're gonna go all the way to 400 and you can see how far back I have to get now. All right, well that's all the shots done. That's all we can do out here. So now for the rest of it, let's go hop back into the computer so we can have a look at these and really see the difference in what I'm talking about here. So I'll see you back in the computer. All right, so we're back in the studio and I got the pictures all up. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at two things. We're gonna look at the backgrounds and we're gonna look at distortions. So both of these things are effects of the changing focal lengths, but there's some different things going on with both of them, so we're going to talk about them. So let's jump in. Okay, so let's start with the 24 millimeter here. So right off the bat, what you'll notice is how close I had to be to her. I was like barely a meter away from her to get this perspective and to get that half body shot. And what we're going to be looking at here is this area and this area. So the background behind her. For 24 millimeters, this is great for an environmental portrait. If you want to show this background off and kind of tell a story with her in there. Okay, so as we go up here, here's the 50. Now you'll see this tree right here and these two trees are a lot closer, and you'll notice there's a lot less background in here. And you'll notice that these two areas, the whole background, all of this stuff back here just looks a lot closer to her now. And that's just at 50. Now we'll go up to 100, and now you can't even see this whole bush in the whole field of view anymore. And these trees right here are just getting way closer. And this is at 100 millimeters. So now we're getting really telephoto, and here's a 200 millimeter, and here is that one tree, and you can barely see any of that, and here is that entire bush right here. So the background is getting super blurred out now, and it's also coming a lot closer. And then here's the last one at 400 millimeters, and the background is just completely gone, and there's none of that bush left. And this tree here is just massive, and it just looks like it is right behind her, like way closer than 24 millimeters, which is this tree right here. So you can see the drastic difference between here's this what seems to be a little bush and this tree that seems to be way far away. And then at 400 millimeters, again, the model hasn't moved at all. So here's that little bush, which is actually not so little, and here's that tree, which is looking way closer. And again, this one was not shot at some super shallow depth of field. This was shot at f5.6. So one last thing to notice here is we're going back to the 50 millimeter image. The 24 millimeter, I didn't do a real good job with the angle for keeping it consistent. But let's look at the 50 millimeter and notice her face right here, and look at the shape of her face. So it's a little flatter, it's a little rounder, and then come back over here to the 400 and we see it's a lot slimmer and not as rounded. And that's another thing that is caused by that the focal length affects, and that's your facial shape, that's your head shape, that's a distortion. That the wider you are, the closer you are to your subject and the wider your focal length, the more distorted the subject is going to be. And in this case with portraits, that's going to be our face. So as we progress, it's going to smoothen out a little bit. Here's another good example at 200. You can see the difference between 200 and 50 millimeters. This is a little bit wide here and not as wide here. And then we go to 400 and then even more narrow here. Now, of course, lighting and all that and posing and all that definitely makes a big difference and affects that too. But the key thing, the first thing that affects the facial distortion and the body distortion in portraits is going to be your focal length. And that's why a lot of people prefer to shoot, you know, from 85 to 200. And I really enjoy telephotos for portraits because I just love this look. I love the look of her. I love the compressed background. That's another way to get a compressed background without having a super fast lens. But I'm going to do another tutorial on all the different ways you can get that blurred out background and the beautiful bokeh. But for now, let's just stick to focal length. Alright, so hopefully that gave you a good visual representation of what's going on when you're using different focal lengths from wide to super telephoto. So let's talk about compression real quick because we touched on it, and it's the illusion that the background is coming closer to your subject even though your subject is not moving. So it's not really the lens that does this. What does this is the distance of the lens from your subject and from the background. So when you increase that distance, that's actually what's creating that look that the background is coming closer to your subject and moving forward. But either way, that's kind of like a layman's physics terms of it. But either way, what's really going on and what you really need to take away from this is the perceived effect on the actual image and the kind of look that you're going to go for and the story that you're going to tell and all of that stuff. So in practical terms, the takeaway here is the longer the lens you have and the farther away you are from your subject with that lens, the longer the lens you have, the more compression, perceived compression you're going to see in the background, and this more slimming of the bodies or the subjects you're going to see in your image. So that's kind of the takeaway here, and the wider you go and the closer you get to your subject, the more perceived distortion you're going to see on your subject, and also of course the more background is going to be included. And one last thing is, if you'll notice, I didn't go over bokeh, I didn't go over background blur, I didn't talk about my aperture, none of that, because none of that really matters for what we're talking about now, and that's a completely separate tutorial, which I will do here very shortly. But these things, the focal length is one way to affect your background and the amount of blur in the background and the amount of bokeh that you're going to get out of it. So that's going to be coming up in another tutorial, but for this takeaway is all about the focal length, how it's affecting your subject and your background. So hopefully all of that will help you figure out the best way to shoot your portraits and tell your stories through your images. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, or if there's any technical things that you want to know that I didn't go over, or just anything about the focal length and the compression and all that, leave those down in the comments below and I'll definitely answer them. If you like this stuff and you want to see more, definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel because I've got new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Make sure you hit that like button, it really helps me out. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video.